Because, yeah, with multiple children, it can be easy to feel like you might be neglecting one over the other. And that comes with time to just kind of find a way to set aside individual time with each child. I still like to, like right now, I'm spending, once I'm finished with this, I'm going to be spending some time with my son alone. And then the next time I get to spend time alone with my daughter. And so we like them to take turns with me. So that way I can give them me, just us together instead of them sharing me all the time. Because sometimes sibling rivalry pops up over, erupts over that.
Hi, Marcela. I am so excited again to be back for another week. I always love our Cyclebreaker Spotlight interviews because it's just so incredible to hear from other parents.
Yes, and you know something? I've been getting DMs from followers who listen to our podcast saying that the Cyclebreaker Spotlight is just a really good place for them to see that, number one, they're not alone, and number two, that it's not too late, that they can do it because they see other parents like them breaking their cycle, bringing parenting with understanding to their families, and it's just very encouraging for our listeners as well. So yes, we're gonna keep doing this as soon as we can.
Marcela, you have something really exciting coming up this Friday. Am I right?
Yes. So my free class is this Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm going to walk you through the roadmap that has taken hundreds of my students from I don't know what to do, I'm winging it at parenting, I don't know if this is permissive or not, to correcting behavior without using punishment, without giving in, through parenting with understanding. This is a free class. All you have to do is give us your best email, open the description of this podcast episode, or go to my Instagram, my TikTok at highimpactclub, and open the link that I have there in bio and register. Give us your best email so I can send you the Zoom link and some reminders, and come live. Come live. Don't wait for the replay. Why? Because live attendees always get more bonuses. So this month, we are inviting Miranda. She has 2 children, and she's been in the Parenting with Understanding program for a while. And then she's going to come to tell us her experience, what her before was, what happened to her family, to her kids once she started applying Parenting with Understanding, where she's at right now. We're very excited, and I cannot wait to hear from her. Hi, Miranda.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for accepting our invitation to be on the Parenting with Understanding podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and share my story.
Okay, so could you please share with our listeners, how is your family? How many children you have? What is your family situation? All about your family first.
We are a family of 5, so it's me, my husband, and my 2 younger children and a stepdaughter. Stepdaughter lives in Philadelphia, and here at home in Arizona, we are just us 4. So we're kind of a blended family, but there's some complicated things, and so we have one of our children in Philadelphia. And so here we have a 5-year-old boy, Yasir, and I have a 4-year-old girl, Yani. My husband's been in the military for 20 years, and so he just retired this July. And so he's home more often now than he used to be. And we love that. Although it hasn't been a easy transition. It's been smooth. My husband is enjoying retirement. He's enjoying being home with the kids more often. I enjoy it. My oldest, Yasir, he struggles with anxiety a lot of the time. My daughter Yani, she struggles with controlling the impulse to throw things when she's angry. And but besides that, they're really great kids. My son, he loves jujitsu. My daughter, she loves going swimming. She loves playing with water. Just any kind of water game you can name it, she's there for it. Really smart kids, very polite. I think before, man, when I met Marcela, it was right. It was at the right time. She was just starting the program of High Impact Club and Parenting with Understanding.
So, Miranda, you are one of our OG members of the Parenting with Understanding program. You started in 2020, so you've been in doing Parenting with Understanding for a while now. Now, it wasn't always that way. At the time, you only had your son, I think. No, your daughter was small. So, how was your parenting before Parenting with Understanding?
My parenting style before Parenting with Understanding was a lot like my parents' style of parenting. They did spank and they did give punishments. Not so much time out, but it was more so you sit down, you talk about the what the consequences will be if you continue these particular behaviors. I think I only spanked my son, maybe he'll probably say I spanked him more, but I think I can only count on two hands how many times I spanked him before Parenting with Understanding. And now I don't remember the last time I spanked. I really don't, because we have a respectful relationship, a respectful understanding between me and the two kids. And that's what I really learned. I feel like my biggest takeaway after learning Parenting with Understanding is having a respectful relationship with your children, and having trying and seeking to connect with them and finding a way to respectfully, implement consequences around the house or around their behavior. And that's been working. Like, our kids are very respectful at school, at church, when we're in the store. I mean, sure, are they kids and they run around and they make mistakes? Of course, yeah, they're going to make mistakes, and they're still learning how to manage their emotions and things like that. But yeah, I feel like I have a plan. I have a way to respond rather than to react to my children when they misbehave.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of parents want to parent differently. They don't want to use the things that their parents used, but they don't have any other tools. So what I hear you saying in this is that you gained a new toolkit, and now you haven't had to go back to those old rusty tools anymore, because these new tools are working wonderfully for you, and there seems to be a lot more connection in the relationship than disconnection that you were mentioning before.
Exactly. The connection was already there, but I feel like the connection is that much deeper now. Because I remember before, they would feel disconnected from me whenever I would discipline. Now they feel a little bit more connected to me. We're fixing the problem together as mom and son, and as mother and daughter, rather than as, hey, you stay over there, you have your punishment over there, and it's disconnected. Yes. But now it's more connected, even in the sense of discipline. So.
Yes, and that, like, what a beautiful picture to give listeners, because I think, traditionally speaking, parents believe that discipline has to also equal disconnection. I think they think that the disconnection is what teaches, and that the disconnection is what damages. The disconnection is what hurts our children and creates the trauma, if you will, that so many of us have now come to realize that we had from our children, from our childhood. Even if we had wonderful, loving parents, we're now realizing that a lot of the ways that they created that disconnection and discipline were actually really hurtful to us. So I love that you say that about connection in discipline, that it is possible to maintain the connection while you are disciplining and teaching your children. I do have a personal question, and there are two things here that I see. Number one, you are a person of color, and there are a lot of persons of color on mine and Marcela's TikTok channels, Instagram channels, that will say that parenting with understanding is privileged parenting. So I would love for you to be able to speak to that from the position of a person of color and kind of share your thoughts on that, if you don't mind.
Privileged parenting. So Let's define privileged parenting. What is privileged parenting to you guys?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that what I hear from followers and listeners to the podcast whenever they bring up this topic of privileged parenting, it is essentially that because I am a white woman, I don't have to worry about my child fearing police officers or fearing authority. Like if they don't listen, their life is not at stake. So it's a privilege for me to not have to carry that weight.
Okay. The way I look at privileged parenting, I also, there's that factor, and I also see privileged parenting as socioeconomic status. Maybe we don't have as many resources available to us to be able to discipline our children. But I would say that's not necessarily true if we didn't have as much money, or say if I was a single parent. These particular strategies are still functional to a point. We're not, this particular strategy, gentle parenting, is not supposed to change your personality. Your personality is what makes it, it's who you are. All it is just an extra tool to add to your parenting style. And so I don't really feel like it's privileged parenting in my opinion. I feel like it's just a different approach to parenting because I want my kids to grow up as strong, independent individuals that know how to cope with life, because as soon as you're born, life just starts happening. and it's no respect of person. And I feel like gentle parenting opens that doorway for parents to be able to connect with their children through life's difficulties. And when life isn't that difficult, when life is good and when life is bad, I feel like gentle parenting also helps the parent to find coping mechanisms as well. Like you really have to be able to, before you help and teach your child to regulate, you have to figure out how to first regulate yourself. And so, and then we model that as parents. When we find it in ourselves how to regulate ourselves, our children are learning and they're seeing, we're modeling it for them. And so they're learning and they're growing up with the same, like, oh, I remember mom used to she would always sit on her knees and just, before she would say something. And I think these are just great tools. It's just going to help grow and foster a better or a strong or more prepared, I'll say this, it'll be a more prepared generation, for a generation of children that can be able to handle things emotionally. Because have you guys ever heard that that inner critic, the voice in our head is typically the voice of our parents?
Yeah.
And so I can just imagine our next generation, what if their inner critic is saying, hey, come on, you got this. I'm going to walk you through it. You are capable. You are strong enough for this. You got this. And so what if their inner critic changes because our parenting changed, And so that's kind of what I envision that's why I picked gentle parenting, because I'm like, okay, I see a lot of potential. And I'm seeing evidence as well. So
That's amazing.
Miranda, I just got, as you were saying all those things, I got little goosebumps. And this is something that I've heard, I've seen in my master classes when I talk about parenting with understanding, that behavior communicates a need, that isn't until we find what the need is and I walk them through what the needs. A lot of people type, but I have multiples pulling on me. How am I supposed to do parenting with understanding? So my question for you here, Miranda, from a mom who does parenting with understanding with multiples, considering that you're a military mom, meaning that for long periods of time, it was just you with the kids, applying parenting with understanding. You didn't have an extra support. Now you do because your husband is retiring. But at that moment, number one, is it possible? And number two, how was that possible for you?
So before I had, because now I do have more support from my husband than I used to, because, he's retired now. And so it was moment by moment that I had to find way, and I still do, find ways to really regulate myself. So I love the use method. Unveiling the need became very, like, I understood that right away, and it became easier to manage the children when they could tell. Like, kids can tell when you care, and they can tell when you don't. And so when they started noticing that I was asking them, "Hey, are you hungry? Like, tell me yes or no. Are you hungry? You need some water," And so at the beginning it was just kind of addressing their needs. Would you like a hug? And I know it can be hard when you're addressing multiple children because they can have two separate different needs at different times and sometimes even at the same time. And so with that, I had to use, I had to teach them patience. And that was when I remember that was one of the first lessons when starting Marcela's program. I said, okay, I want to teach them how to wait because they're going to have to learn to wait their turn in life in general. And so we really had to drill them on that. And when I mean drilling, I'm talking about the use method is unveiling the need, settling them down, and E is for education. And so I had to really just educate them in a positive way, whether it's like we have little toys where we kind of did role play and say, oh, this person wants ice cream. They're standing in line. We'll have to, what are they going to do? They want ice cream right now. What are they going to do? But there's someone in front of them. Are they going to push that person out of the way, or are they going to just wait their turn? And find something, a song to sing and while you're waiting. And so these are like little things that we did and that we still do from time to time too, just to kind of reinforce, basic life things such as waiting your turn or because with multiple children, it can be easy to feel like you might be neglecting one over the other. And that's that comes with time to just kind of find a way to set aside individual time with each child. I still like to, like right now, I'm spending, once I'm finished with this, I'm going to be spending some time with my son alone. And then the next time I get to spend time alone with my daughter. And so we like them to take turns with me. So that way I can give them me, just us together instead of them sharing me all the time. Because sometimes sibling rivalry pops up over, erupts over that, just fighting over the parents' attention. That happens still to this day, that happens. And so typically when I see that starting to erupt, I say, okay, hey, come over here and help me in the kitchen. And I'll say, hey, Yanni, come help me in the kitchen. And then we'll be in the kitchen while Yasir is watching his favorite show. So he gets his own time alone from his sister. And so this is kind of what we're balancing around the house. I said, okay, it looks like you guys need time apart. And so I'll say, hey, Yanni, come over here and help me wash the dishes. While Yasir is by himself, he's having his alone time, and then Yasir will start missing me. And I said, okay, Yasir, it's your turn to go in the kitchen. Yanni, your turn to be with Papa. And it's kind of like you really have to find your rhythm in your family, how to give each kid their individual time with you. And so, and I noticed that once they have time with me, they're a lot less intense. They're a lot less intense.
By the way, for the listeners who may be asking themselves, I want to know more about the use formula, the use method that Miranda was talking about. Okay, so the use method is the method that we teach inside the Parenting with Understanding program. And that's the whole spectrum of Parenting with Understanding. Number one, unveiling the needs, and then I go in depth in the program about each one of those needs, how they present, what to do in order to meet those needs. Number two, the S, which is settling down. We cannot discipline or teach anything to our children if our children are up here, in meltdown mode. There are 4 behavior levels that they go through, and if we're able to recognize early signs, they won't need to go to meltdown all the time. That's why parents who go through apply Parenting with Understanding, they see less meltdowns, less tantrums, and it's because they're trained to recognize early signs. And the E, which is educating, is like the discipline portion. And discipline is educating. It's not about the consequence or the punishment. Consequences are due when they're due. However, it's more about the teaching, what children are walking away with, not what the punishment is. And if you're thinking, okay, I want more information, I want to know more before I see if I could commit to starting the Parenting with Understanding program, this Friday I have a free class. And I'm going to be touching on that roadmap, the roadmap to correct behavior without punishment, without giving in. And I'm going to walk you through each one of those steps, of course, in a more on a broader level. And if you want to dive deeper on each one of those steps, so you know exactly what the need is, so you know what the early signs are, so you know how to discipline your children, all the steps, then at the end, I will give you an opportunity to enroll in the Parenting with Understanding program. So to register for this free class, very simple, just open the description of this podcast episode, give us your best email so we can send you the Zoom link, and I'll see you on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, Miranda, I have a question for you that I know that a lot of our listeners are thinking about. You mentioned that your spouse is a military spouse, and the military is definitely not gentle. So I hear this a lot from our listeners and our followers as well, where they are thinking, okay, how do I get my spouse on board? I have a military spouse. They are very regimented. They don't understand this whole gentle parenting with understanding things. So I am curious what your experience has been with your husband and how he has gotten on board and how that transition is working for you guys now that he's home more.
So in the beginning, it was very difficult for my husband to understand what parenting with understanding was. It took several examples. Like I had to start... just so he would understand, I started disciplining my children in English in front of him just so he gets the repetition. So my husband needed repetition. He needed modeling. He needed because he just honestly didn't understand it. And he thought it looked like permissive parenting from the outside looking in. And it wasn't until he understood the needs of the children. And it wasn't until I compared it to his own needs, like, hey, what if you went 3 days without eating? How would you feel? How would you react? What if you've, after asking me to show you love and affection, if I just said no a few times more than usual, how would you feel about me? And so these children, they need food, they need safety, they need belonging, they need these things in order to feel whole and like they, to feel complete here. And so we do, because we're a Christian family, we're not just a military family, we're a Christian family, and so we do sprinkle in biblical concepts as well, because we feel like their spirit needs to be fed as well. And so we sprinkled that in as well, and we just kind of blended with the parenting with understanding. But yeah, it was very difficult for him to wrap his head around it. And so he made lots of mistakes trying to implement it, but that was corrected after he watched a few of Marcela's lessons online. I noticed that he's a lot more patient now. So he had to work on himself. He had to work on being more understanding. He had to work on being more patient. And me, I'm a teacher, and so I woke up like this. I usually have patience. I usually have more patience than your average person. And so that's just the way we're built as teachers, I feel like. And so I already came with my own little tools, even before the gentling or parenting with understanding. But Sean, he didn't have anything. He only had what he grew up with. And he also grew up with spanking. And, he also grew up with, children are seen, not heard. And that's just kind of how he grew up. And so, yeah, it was a transition. Now that he's at home with the children more often, he's taking them to swimming and jujitsu and things like that. He gets to spend a little bit more time with them. They're feeling a whole lot more connected with him. And I'm usually like I try not to get offended, but I'm a little hurt. But I'm also a little relieved when he says, "Hey, who wants to go with me?" They'll both raise their hand and be like, "Me!" And so I'm just like, okay. And so I'm like, oh, I'm hurt, but I'm like, hey, free. And so,
Yes.
and so it's been really cool just to see them getting closer to their dad now that he's here more often, and he's loving it too. He's becoming, like I said, he's more patient than he used to be, more understanding. I think there's it's steps, it's process, because we're not perfect with the whole parenting with understanding. We still make mistakes, right? We're human. We have our moments, but not as many moments as we used to.
That's awesome. That's so encouraging that you said that he is learning still. You are learning still, and I think that brings up a really important point that we're not ever going to be perfect. Marcela is the creator of the program and still does not perfectly implement the use formula and parenting with understanding 100% of the time because we're human, right? But I love that you have seen that bond, you've seen the connection, and that you were able to connect with him in a way that made sense to him. It sounds to me like you kind of gently parented him through it, that you didn't go to him and say, you're doing all these things wrong and you better do it right. I think that's so incredible. And I also loved that you mentioned that he is watching the videos with you. And that's the beauty of the program, is that it is your family can watch together and you have lifetime access to it. So even if you are the only person doing it, you have to trust that what you implement, your spouse will be watching. And hopefully, like Miranda's husband, they do get on board and start to want to watch with you and learn for themselves.
If you got anything out of this podcast episode, I encourage you to leave us a review and let us know how it helped you. And if you haven't followed us, what are you waiting for? At the Considerate Mama at High Impact Club. We are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, on YouTube as well. And if you are a customer, if you have any of HIC Parenting's products, just join us in our private Facebook group. Just look for us on Facebook, HIC Cyclebreaker private Facebook group, and request to join us.
And don't forget, it only takes understanding to break your cycle. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.